If you thought the trade war with China was just an obsession of Donald Trump's, you'd better think again. At the moment of making this video, most of the Democratic candidates for the 2020 elections have a very similar tone against China. Check this out.
Elizabeth Warren could be, quote, even tougher than Trump on China, says analyst. Joe Biden flips on China threat, now says it's serious.
Of course, all of them criticize Trump's approach and suggest different strategies, but everyone seems to agree on the basics. China is no longer a partner, but a threat instead. So yes, my dear viewers, the trade war is not a short story, but a political saga. If we have a new Star Wars trilogy in cinemas, the media is now talking about the trade wars. Just in case you don't know what the trade war is, here's a small recap. Basically, everything started when Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese goods such as steel. Right after that, China replied with tariffs on American goods, including soy. The confrontation escalated into more and more tariffs for thousands of goods and products. And I know what many of you might be thinking right now. If you don't live in China or in the United States, well, why should you care about any of this? Well, the International Monetary Fund has the answer.
IMF says trade war cuts global growth to lowest since financial crisis a decade ago.
Yes, you heard that right. This trade war might lead to a global recession, and well, this affects nearly everybody. So the question you might have now is, why is Trump so keen on destroying the world's economy? Of course, according to many media outlets, Trump is the bad guy in this story. If this were Star Wars, we would be talking about Emperor Trumpatine. But the truth is, whether we like it or not, there is some reasoning behind Trump's strategy. We might disagree with it, but we must understand it because no matter who wins the 2020 elections, this is going to be a thing for a long time. So now the question is, why do the Democratic candidates agree with Trump on the basics when it comes to China? What does America want to achieve with this trade war, and what are the reasons behind it? Well, today we're going to look at all of these questions, but before we do, let's take a look back at the history.
Protectionism awakens.
The first character of this story is the World Trade Organization, also known as the WTO. It was created in 1995 with the aim of helping international trade. So the first question you might have is, well, why do we need an organization to trade with other countries? Here's an example. Let's say Canadians want to buy Colombian pineapples. They decide to cut all the tariffs on Colombian fruit. Colombia says, well, isn't this great? Now we have a new country buying our pineapples. Woo! But in the meantime, they keep tariffs on the Canadian apples that they import. Why? Well, because they want to protect their local producers. At this point, the Canadians would say, look man, we're letting you compete with our local farmers, but you're not letting us compete with yours? That's not cool. This is when the WTO comes into the picture. All the country members agreed on a rule called reciprocity, which means that if Colombia imposes 10% tariffs on foreign fruit, then the rest of the countries will all put tariffs on Colombian fruit. So far, so good, right? I think it sounds pretty fair. But hold on just a second, because this is not the only rule. For example, there are some rules to avoid dumping or abuses. This is why, in a previous video, I told you how the European Union sells French fries to Colombia under the market price because EU farmers have grants. Of course, this makes a lot of countries angry, and this is why Colombia has taken this case to the WTO courts. And I know what you're going to say to me now. You're going to say, oh, Simon, all of this sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It's so beautiful. It's so great. They're holding hands. They're probably singing Kumbaya. Well, it's all BS. We all know that a farmer from Kentucky has tractors, irrigation systems, and technology, but a Zambian farmer has a donkey and a plow. It's absolutely clear that the dude in Kentucky is a little bit more productive than the guy in Zambia. This is far from equal opportunity, isn't it? Well, this is the important part of this story. The WTO is aware of this, and so there is something called developing nation status. Basically, developing nations have some privileges and they do not need to follow some of the rules. And back in 2001, when China entered the WTO, they had this developing nation status. Thanks to this, the international community turned a blind eye to many things. So now you might wonder, well, what's the issue with China? What are they doing so wrong? So basically, when it comes to exports, China loves the WTO. That's why we have so much stuff with, that made in China written there on the side. But good luck trying to sell or invest in China because they have one of the most protectionist regimes that you could possibly imagine. We've told you many times here on VisualPolitik, China is still a communist dictatorship, and you can still tell. The government still has 5-year plans like the old Soviet Union did, and there are still big state-owned companies with whom you just can't compete. And now you could say, well, come on, Simon, there are thousands of American companies investing and building factories in China. Well, yes, absolutely, there are, but if you want to start a company there, well, first you need to partner with a local business. And in most cases, next to each foreign worker you employ, you also have to employ a Chinese worker in the same position. Why? Because China loves to learn from foreign technology. Don't believe me? Here's a good example. Siemens, the German company. Siemens won a contract with the Chinese government to build high-speed trains. They were really happy because it was really good money. So what happened? Chinese workers learned from Siemens' proprietary technology. Years later, China starts the world's biggest high-speed train manufacturer, CRRC, and now they compete face-to-face with Siemens on the German market. Check this out.
Chinese train technology rolls into Germany.
But this is just one example. According to Donald Trump, intellectual property stealing by China translates to $300 billion losses for American companies every single year. And fighting against this is the cornerstone of his agenda.
We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries, making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs. Protection will lead to great prosperity and strength.
So, is he right? Well, as we usually say on VisualPolitik, yes and no. It is true that China didn't play fair in many cases, but it's also true that many foreign companies sell in China. Lego, the toy blocks manufacturer, has survived in part because they opened markets in China. But regardless of what we think is right, the truth is that Trump's strategy is to be tough on China so they follow international trade rules. How? Well, let's have a look at that right now.
The last tariff.
Everything started in March 2018, when Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminium. 1 month later, he went further than that to put 25% tariffs on 1,300 Chinese products. And yes, 25% is high. In a matter of hours, Beijing answered in the same way and applied tariffs on soy as well as plane and automobile parts. Basically, these are the American products that China buys the most. So these tariffs had an immediate impact on both economies. And this is where Trump began using his most fearful weapon in this war, the Twitter menace.
We are not in a trade war with China. That war was lost many years ago by the foolish or incompetent people who represented the United States. Now we have a trade deficit of $500 billion a year, with intellectual property theft of another $300 billion. We cannot let this continue.
So after this, Trump kept putting more and more tariffs on Chinese intermediate products. These are goods like microchips that you need in order to manufacture finalized goods.
Tariffs are working far better than anyone anticipated. China's market dropped 27% in the last 4 months, and they are talking to us. Our market is stronger than ever, and will go up dramatically when these horrible trade deals are successfully renegotiated. America first.
And the trade wars continued. After Trump attacked, Xi Jinping struck back.
China retaliates against Trump with fresh tariff on U.S. liquid natural gas.
The consequences of this were big and immediate. Since America started exporting liquefied natural gas back in 2016, China has been one of its best clients. After the introduction of this new tariff, American gas imports dropped by more than 60%. But wait a minute, because the trade wars are far from over. Why? A year ago, Trump and Xi Jinping met at the G20 summit in Buenos Aires. They made a truce and announced negotiations. However, China didn't stick to America's deadlines. So, what did the White House do? Raised tariffs again, this time on more than 5,000 Chinese products. You know what happens with Xi Jinping? For each tariff Trump imposed, he answered with a similar one. And the story kept going again and again until this.
Google blocks Huawei after Donald Trump edict.
Yes, I know, in this case, they haven't applied the strongest measures against Huawei, but still, the company was heavily damaged by this. In fact, their new luxury phone is selling really badly in Europe because it doesn't have Android or Google services. And the story is far from over. Since August 2019, Washington has kept raising tariffs little by little. Why do they do this little by little? Well, because of this.
Trump delays some China tariffs to limit impact on holiday shopping.
As you can imagine, the problem with this war is not only raising prices all over the place, but also uncertainty for businesses. Don't forget that companies plan their strategies 4 or 5 years ahead, but how can you plan anything if they can double tariffs on anything you import or export at any moment? So now the question is, how is this affecting America's economy, and how might it affect a would-be Trump re-election for 2020? Well, let's have a look at that.
Rise of Trump.
As I told you at the beginning, for years China had a special status with the WTO. Everybody knew they were cheating, but everybody expected they would change over time. Trump has been the first American president to open Pandora's box. So how did the Democratic Party react? Well, of course, everyone criticized the way Trump is doing things, but they all seem to agree on the basics. For example, one of the candidates for the Democratic primaries is Joe Biden. Biden was the vice president during the times of Barack Obama, and some people believe that he would bring things back to how they were before. But it doesn't always look as though that is what would happen.
Biden slams Trump's trade war even as he calls to, quote, get tough on China.
Senator Bernie Sanders is tougher than Biden. Sanders claims that American workers are lowering their quality of life because of Chinese competitors, so chances are he would continue the trade war with China. And don't forget Elizabeth Warren and her so-called economic patriotism. Check this out.
Elizabeth Warren could be even tougher than Trump on China, says analyst.
Of course, it's one thing to be tough on China and another to support Trump's agenda. The devil is in the details. But at least at the moment, we can say that the trade war has been a triumph for Trump's ideology. He made all the candidates buy at least the foundation of his proposals. So, what's the price for all of this? We won't know until the elections. It is clear that China has a lot to lose on this, but make no mistake, Americans are also paying. This could have a big impact on Trump's re-election. For example, the soy producers in the Midwest are selling less and less due to China's tariffs, and so are the factories in the Rust Belt, who now pay much more for the raw materials that they use. We've already explained on VisualPolitik how the steel tariffs hit American icons like Harley-Davidson very hard.
Trump's economy is failing exactly where he needs it to succeed.
The states that are suffering the most are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, where Trump beat Clinton by just 1%. A slight change in the results in 2020 might give the presidency to the Democrats. Let's not forget that we are talking about a difference of only 80,000 votes. The trade war is also doing terrible damage in China, who are not as strong as we thought. In fact, they may have cheated in the way they calculate the macroeconomic figures. But even if we gave face value to their figures, their economy is not growing as fast as it used to. For the moment, it looks as if Xi Jinping will wait to make compromises until he knows who will be in the White House next year. But no matter who wins the elections, the relationship between China and America will never be the same. And if you thought Trump is willing to soften tariffs just because of the electoral campaign, well, you'd better think again.
Trump signs Hong Kong democracy legislation, angering China.
On December the 15th, 2019, Trump and Xi Jinping signed a truce that will last until the next meeting. China has committed to eliminate some tariffs to agricultural imports, and America will do the same with some electronic components. But the war is far from over. In the meantime, Democrats are comparing Republicans to the dark side, and Trump portrays himself as the chosen one. And no, this is not just a gimmick to keep the Star Wars metaphor going to the end of the video. He really did say this.
I'm the chosen one. Somebody had to do it. So I'm taking on China. I'm taking on China on trade. And you know what? We're winning because we're the piggy bank.
So now the question goes to you. Do you think America is right with their claims about China? Do you think China will end up compromising with America in order to stop the trade wars? Is Donald Trump really the chosen one? Well, please leave your answer in the comment section below, and don't forget to check out reconsidermedia.com, the podcast that provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, don't forget we publish brand new videos every week, and as always, I'll see you next time.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.